What is going on, guys, and welcome back. So in our last video I told you that it's not over and that even though 2020 has given us a lot of challenges, it might be one of the greatest opportunities in our lifetimes. And in order for us to do so, we must take on the challenges and we must look for the solutions to all the problems we're currently facing. Now in this video, I want to specifically dive deep into what are those challenges, what are those problems of the 2020s that need to be solved. We'll look at the problems, then we'll look into what are the potential solution industries, and lastly into what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge do you need to acquire in order to be part of the solution. The first problem that we need to be solving in the 2020s is to create a new financial system without the corruption that is currently running rampant. This is the place where I spend most of my time day to day in the cryptocurrency space, but it goes far beyond cryptocurrencies. Because the problem we're facing is both ideological and structural. Let's first address it from an ideological perspective. What we currently experience in our world is not true capitalism. Rather, it's that very perverted version of capitalism that Ayn Rand talked about in Atlas Shrugged 70 years ago. You see, too much of taxpayers' money goes towards subsidies, goes towards bailout, goes towards limiting competition for a lot of companies that spend less time innovating and more time lobbying. We saw this now more than ever in 2020, where once again, as crisis struck, big companies and banks and so forth were getting credit, were getting bailouts, rather than letting the free market take its course. You see, it was the very same airline companies that were taking advantage of the customers via 1,000 different fees, that were running poor business by buying back their shares rather than even setting aside a couple dollars for a rainy day. And it's those very companies that got billions in bailout, in free grants that they don't have to repay from the government. You see, in a free market, when a company fails, another can go and buy it up. But all too often that is prevented. At the same time, the average American is not getting a bailout, with over 40% of the people making under $40,000 being unemployed. And even small businesses aren't getting the same help that large corporations are. So from an ideological perspective, we have to choose a system. Now I feel true capitalism is the best system, and I encourage you to read all the classics on economics to make your own choice. But the bottom line is, what we experience right now is not a true form of capitalism, but rather crony capitalism, where those that are tightest with the government, where those that spend the most amount of money on lobbying, can bend the rules in their favor in order to be more competitive than the rest. If you want to fight that problem, either study economics or politics and take it to Washington either as an elected representative or as part of a think tank. However, this problem can also be addressed from a structural perspective. And this is where cryptocurrencies and blockchain comes in. You see, part of the reason why the banks always get a bailout, no matter what they do, is because the entire economy and the entire world depend on them structurally. Clearly, the Fed is not going to let the spokes of the wheel break because it could risk breaking the wheel in and of itself. What DeFi, decentralized finance, for example, are doing is replace the wheel in and of itself. DeFi, or decentralized finance, nowadays makes up a huge part of the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. The aim of which is to replace traditional financial services with decentralized or open ones, where there are no borders and where there are no middlemen. What Amazon, so to say, did for retail is what open finance is doing to lending, to trading, to derivatives, and so much more. And it's taking it so much further because while Amazon is still a middleman, with DeFi there are no middlemen. For instance, in decentralized finance, I can give a loan to a decentralized pool and earn perhaps 8% interest. In exchange, somebody who wants to take a loan out has to collateralize the loan with tokenized assets. Now, at this time, collateralization takes place via assets like Bitcoin or Ether. But in the future, it could be anything that's tokenized, like tokenizing your house so that you can use those tokens as collateral for taking out debt. This, in effect, is a much more stable form of debt than the one we currently have, because right now, debt is not backed by anything, because a bank can give you a loan, like for example via a credit card, and if you can't make payments, well, you can still declare bankruptcy, and that money's gone. Whereas with decentralized finance, everything right now aims to be backed by real assets, by collateral. All of a sudden, I can earn interest on my assets by lending them to somebody else. And at the same time, somebody else is able to get a loan without needing the approval from a bank so long as he can collateralize it. Essentially, the goal of DeFi is to offer any kind of financial service that is currently being offered in the world, and even more services that aren't even thought of yet, but offer them in a way where there's no central authority standing behind it. And once we can pull it off as a community, then it is no longer about ideology, but it is about replacing the financial system from an entire structural perspective. Because then the bank is no longer an actor like it is now that can have corrupted behavior and get bailed out, but much rather it is infrastructure. It is like the streets, the roads that we use every single day. It has no feelings, it is not partisan, it simply works. And at that point, we'll also have much less financial fragility from a global macro standpoint. If you want to be part of the solution in decentralized finance, learn about blockchain and learn about crypto. Look, there's already countless projects. You don't need to start your own. And these projects need your help in any area. Some need coders, some need designers, some need marketers. There's so many jobs that need to be done because this is already now an industry with over $1 billion in assets. And I cannot imagine a future where DeFi hasn't completely redefined the way finance works. Problem number 2, environmental degradation. Now look, there's some people that say, look, climate change isn't real, it's cyclical. But something I always like to stress is whether you believe in climate change or not, there's 2 things we can agree upon. Number 1 is depletion of resources. Once you chop all the trees down, there are no more trees left unless you create new ones. So we need to find a way to replenish resources faster than we use them. Secondly, pollution is real. Look, whether it's getting hotter or not because of humans, one thing we can agree upon. If you go to a big city and you can taste the smog in your lungs, that is not something you experience when you're out in the countryside. So pollution too is real and has effect on our lives and our environment. So whether you do it for climate change, for the depletion of resources, or pollution, we need to take a look at the environment so that we can make sure that this planet stays sustainable for the long run. I am somebody who always likes to put as much energy into the big solutions that can actually resolve a problem, but I think too much effort and time has been put into activism to fight some kind of magical overlord that is ruining the environment. People striking and not going to school, or people fighting the use of plastic straws isn't exactly the way how we prevent Armageddon. Because really there's only 2 ways we can prevent environmental degradation, which is number 1, reduce destruction, and number 2, spur regeneration. Now when I say reduce destruction, you have to understand that we live on a big planet and not everybody will agree with you. So you can't force people to change their habits. What you can do though is provide them a better alternative. And when we talk about better alternatives, money speaks. The end and death of oil, coal, and gas and other potentially harmful energy sources are when its clean energy alternatives are cheaper and more efficient. Whether we like it or not, the world goes round because of money. So when you can find a solution to make clean energy more affordable, there will be no capitalists left in the world that will be paying a premium to harm the planet. They might be selfish, but they're not dumb. And there's countless approaches to scientifically helping the environment, whether it's inventing better solar panels, whether it's inventing meat replacements, as we've seen over the past few years, as the meat industry creates a huge amount of carbon emissions. There's countless ways to be productive, to find solutions that make the world better, that make the world more fun, while at the same time helping it evolve and grow. And instead of protesting and telling people they can't take that vacation because that international flight will damage the environment, provide them alternatives. You see, people still want to see Europe, for example. How could you do that? Well, if you create an amazing virtual reality where people can travel the world from home without causing any carbon emissions, you just solve the problem. It's not that people want to take international flights, but they want to go on an adventure. People want to see the world. If you can help them do that without needing to get on a plane, you just solve the problem and make people happy. You see, there is a way to save this planet and to help this planet recover without going back to the dark ages. And if we can approach environmental conservation and protection from a more forward-looking perspective, there's nothing that can stop us. Be part of the solution rather than clamoring about the problem. Because the problem is real, but there's something we need to do about it. How can you be part of the solution? As I said, there's countless ways. Whether you approach from a physics or chemistry perspective in order to find new energy sources, whether you approach from a biology perspective to create meat replacements, whether you approach from a tech perspective to create a new virtual reality to replace air travel. There's so many ways you can attack this problem by simply looking at where does environmental degradation come from? How can we replace it or make it better? Or also, how can we spur regeneration? Perhaps there's a way for us to grow trees faster. Now you might say, well, I don't want to genetically added trees, and that's fine. But perhaps you could do that for simply wood farms in order for us to generate wood. Again, there's countless solutions to our problem. So this way, we, for example, wouldn't have to chop down the rainforest, but rather we can create wood in a lab more or less. Now, I know, might get hate here for saying genetically editing wood for it to grow faster, but I'm just spitballing here saying, look, there's countless different ways to get to a solution, but we won't get there unless we think about all the different options we have, and then of course go ahead and weigh the consequences, weigh the costs. And once you've done so, you can choose a path to help solve this problem. Now the third and final problem that I think we need to be solving in the 2020s is species and economic resilience. We never experienced this more than in 2020 in the wake of the coronavirus crisis. We had to experience firsthand how poor our supply chains were. We had to experience firsthand how poor our Medicare was. And to be frank, this virus was rather harmless. In the future, there might be much worse problems coming our way that we just are not prepared for. There's a lot we could have done better. It starts with things as simple as people being able to test themselves at home and being able to keep their data private without having to share with the government. It goes to things like not putting essential workers at risk and perhaps having things like drone delivery, going to stores and being able to check out without needing a cashier there that's putting themselves at risk. Automation and robotics will be a big part of our lives so that we can go through phases like this without any interruption. And this is particularly true in the supply chain space and then the manufacturing space, where really there shouldn't have been any interruptions because almost all of that could be automated. And that doesn't have to come at the detriment of the lower classes of society, because you might be saying, well, those delivery drivers would lose their jobs, the people at the store would lose their jobs. You see, there are all ways where we can lift the standard of living for everybody in society, while at the same time also advancing society. Because 200 years ago, 90+% of people would work on farms. Now it's less than 10% of the population that work in the food industry. Does it mean that all of us are unemployed? No, we simply create new jobs. Now people can make money managing social media accounts. People make money as influencers. People make money as lawyers. Your average 20-year-old can be an entrepreneur. And I think most would agree that it is beneficial for society that, number one, now we have technology, where we say we have the internet. The average person can afford a computer. The average person has access to the internet. In fact, there's a lot of free internet across most cities with free Wi-Fi, whereas that was a luxury in the past. At the same time, I think most would also agree that it's beneficial for society that not everybody has to break their backs working on a farm or working in a steel mill, but rather have cushy jobs, working on social media, driving Uber, providing financial services. Like, these aren't hazardous jobs. And as we move into the future, that trend can continue to be so, where almost all the hazardous jobs, almost all the hard jobs, so to say, can be automated, and we can shift society into either easier jobs, so to say, that require more mental faculties rather than physical faculties, or at the same time creative jobs. Something you might have noticed over the last 30 years or so is that with the advent of the internet and with technology, more and more people are pursuing the arts. There's more video creators than ever before, a lot more music than ever before. Television is getting a new life with high-level production of series. People make whole livings with podcasts. So we can truly create a new utopia, a new renaissance by applying all these different factors, by using AI, by using more automation, by replacing physical manual labor with robotics. And at the same time, also fighting our weaknesses, where, for example, we can use genetic editing to put an end to things like cancer, to Alzheimer's, and find solutions to the causes that cause the most deaths, like heart disease, respiratory disease, strokes. And when it comes to resilience of the species, we can take it a step further and look more into space exploration, because while we can protect this planet, there will be some things we won't be able to protect this planet from eventually. Think about how fast and unexpected this virus came. What if all of a sudden we see that an asteroid is hurling towards Earth and we only have maybe 50 years until it hits us. In such an event, we need to be ready to not just evacuate society, but also have plan B ready that we can evacuate to. So with this third point, there's truly no bounds to the fields you could study in order to tackle these problems. To name a few are AI, automation, robotics, genetic editing, space exploration, and so many more. The bottom line, you might have noticed, out of all these three areas, these three big problems, starting at a new financial system, to protecting the earth, to providing more species resilience, all of them take out of the box thinking so we can create real solutions rather than always regurgitate the same rhetoric that simply won't move us forward. And no, most of these issues cannot be solved with things like dropshipping or any of the other things that most 20-year-olds spend their time studying and putting their time and energy into. You see, we need more young people studying these emerging industries, from blockchain and crypto to renewable energies to AI and automation, so that we can create solutions that actually move us forward, that actually go to solve the big problems that need to be addressed. So my one goal with this video simply is to inspire a couple of you out there that might be looking for your mission, that might be looking for that big goal, that motivation, that spark to start something new, and where you should be looking, where you should be going. Perhaps one or a couple of these many things spoke to you. And if so, simply dive right in. Study it, look into it, watch some videos, find out what the top books in that industry are, and then find out who are the people writing these books. Get in touch with them, see where they're working, find out the big players, the big companies building in those spaces. Try to intern for them, ask them how you can help. The bottom line is we need more creative minds putting their time, energies, and strengths towards building solutions, and the time to do so is now. This world has plenty of problems, but for every problem, there's a million different solutions, and it's up to you to find one. And the beautiful thing about capitalism is that when you find a solution, you get paid handsomely for having found it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Get busy. There's a lot for us to be doing right now. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and let me know, what are you going to look more into, particularly if this whole lockdown lasts any longer, because you have time now more than ever. And as always, don't forget, hit that like button, smash the subscribe button, because we need to grow as a community, because I think this message needs to go to as many people as possible. And if you liked it and enjoyed it, go share it with a friend, because they need to hear it too. As always, take care, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.